it back over to Ray and let him say a few words to introduce everyone and get us started.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I first would like to introduce each board member that's on, and I'll start with Karen Wolf. Karen Wolf. You can say a few words, Karen, if you would.
A few words are thank you for participating, and we're looking forward to working with our shared governance partners to help us plot a path forward. So thank you for being here.
Regent Tracy Klein. I'll jump over to, we'll come back to Tracy. It looks like she has a bandwidth problem. John, you might want to check on that. Regent Ed Manideeds.
Good morning, Ed Manideeds here. I'm from Eau Claire, and I'm happy that you're participating and help us with these problems as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to stress, and if Tracy Klein gets, Regent Klein gets, there she is. There's Regent Tracy Klein. Would you introduce yourself? Go ahead, Regent Klein, if you would introduce yourself.
Perfect. Of the university system. Across.
Thank you, Regent Klein. Your bandwidth was breaking up some, but I think we got the gist of that thing. I want to stress here that we're really here to listen, and I'm chastising myself here, so I'll try not to talk too much. We're here to listen to your, not just your questions, but also your comments. So you feel free to interject comments to us. You don't just have to ask a question, but I would encourage you, if you can, to do that by raising your hand and verbally expressing that. However, if you cannot do that, please feel free to use question mark as well. I want to start with a little bit about the background. Jeff, could you have the host? I don't have the ability to. There it is. To mute somebody's mic. The challenges we face. I'm not sure that everybody understands the depth and breadth of the financial situation we're facing. To give you a comparison, we have been obviously lost $100 million net for this current semester through the end of June. That's the expected loss across the system. In addition to that, we have suffered a 5% lapse and roughly around 45 million. And on top of that, we know that no matter what happens in the fall, we fully expect to be back. However, that will probably be in some mixed hybrid format, and however we end up accomplishing that, it cost us more money, and it will and our enrollment will not be as strong. Having said all of that, we understand the state's financial situation is in peril as well. So this is not a direct response to the COVID-19. This is not a short-term solution. That is the 3 recommendations I put on the table. They're much longer, given the demographic challenges facing the state and the university, of course, with fewer high school graduates, understanding the financial condition of the state, which is not good, and recognizing that it will be some time before that recovers in a really strong fashion. And given the cuts that we have faced and the inability to raise our tuition, we don't enter this crisis in a really good position. And that all of those combine to force us to look at this differently. And so what I have put on the table as concepts, recommendations of an exiting president, concepts, there's not a lot of flesh on here, hence many of you have filled in the blanks and interpreted the way you wish. And I would like to clarify some of those things, but nevertheless, I put these three different recommendations on the table. And they include program prioritization and evaluation across the system, comprehensive principally. And then, of course, aggregating and consolidating and standardizing administrative operational functions to reduce costs there as well. And then finally, to develop a strategic online strategy, because the growing market is obviously not in the high school graduate area, but in the adult working non-traditional market, where about 815 to 850,000 people have some college and do not have a degree. Those three recommendations are concept recommendations. There's a lot of work needs to be done on the process to make that happen. And the board is interested in hearing your concerns, your frustrations, your ideas, and how you react to these. And I think that's absolutely fair and fully appropriate. And you also need to have a better sense on how this might play out. What is the process that will be used? Some have interpreted this as a totally top-down sort of effort. It is not. Obviously, the next step in this process is for each campus to do a program prioritization and evaluation process using some objective criteria. And that's something that the system would expect campuses to do. Of course, several campuses have done some of that already, if not a lot of it, and that should inform any additional work that would need to be done. Following that, subsequent to that effort, then the system would need to step in and say, let's work together with shared governance, with campus leaders, and identify what the state needs. What does the state need in these areas? And we have duplicated programs in this particular discipline. Is that okay? Are they doing fine? Might we be better off to reduce some of those and eliminate some of those programs, or share them across campuses, which is another goal of this effort. So duplicated programs, services that are provided administratively that are not standardized and use a common function. And of course, finding ways to support efforts on campus while consolidating those. Doesn't mean they'll be all moved to Madison at all. It means that they just would be consolidated someplace. And then finally, the whole approach to a strategic, more unified effort to reach out and better serve adult learners is expressed in that third recommendation. Of course, that also is the improvement of our online efforts to serve traditional students. How do we actually provide a more quality, higher quality effort to those 18 to 22-year-olds typically? And that's something we've actually received a donation to help with, and we're going to do some training and educational work with faculty and staff this summer. That's part of our goal. So that's an overview of those three, and I will open this up for comments and questions from around the state.
Thank you, Ray. There are no questions currently submitted through the Q&A, and no one has their hand up. So I would strongly encourage folks who want to have a question. Oh, and as soon as I say that, somebody answers. I'm going to call on Eric Sandgren, and you're unmuted. Go ahead, Eric. Eric, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, thanks. I thought I better check. I am Eric Sandgren, a professor at UW-Madison and a member of the university committee. The purpose of today's listening session is to receive shared government feedback on the blueprint proposal. And as presented, the proposal doesn't raise new initiatives. All those that are described have been ongoing. What is new is the statement that the system now proposes to make final decisions without shared governance. So in effect, this listening session has the purpose of receiving shared governance feedback on the proposal to ignore shared governance feedback. The appropriate response is obvious. Shared governance exists so that people with appropriate training and experience are involved in crafting policy and making decisions about implementation. In the business world, this would be called best business practices. So the blueprint as written needs to be rejected for 3 reasons. First, its goal is to basically enable uninformed and bad decision-making. Second, its chosen decision makers, the system staff, are alone not qualified to make those decisions. Third, its obvious real agenda is to bypass shared governance. Pretending otherwise is an insult to the intelligence of everyone in the state. To use the appropriate analogy, the emperor has no clothes, so let's stop pretending otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. May I respond to that briefly? First of all, the system approves all new program requests already. Any program proposed by a campus is recommended to the board by the president, or not recommended to the board by the president. So that is no different. That's what we're talking about here, is the system recommending to the board action on a given program. Secondly, the concept presented is a concept, and the process needs to be obviously fleshed out, including the engagement of shared governance, first of all, at the campus level. Shared governance is fundamental to this, absolutely has to be. The concept was put on the table. It is not fleshed out adequately, and so I can understand, given some of the language in the concept, why you might interpret that. And clearly there is no effort or intent on our part to bypass shared governance, Eric, and I hope that as the time goes on, you realize that's true. That is not a hollow or that is not an intentional effort here at all.
All right, thank you, Ray. Next up, we have James Hartwick, and I will unmute you, James. And
hello, this is James Hartwick. I'm from Uw-Whitewater. I'm the at-large rep on our faculty senate. I'm a former faculty senate chair. I know some of the people on the call, and to the others of you, I am grateful for this opportunity to speak with you. I do want to, before I ask my question, I just want to mention I think many of the faculty feel as if this proposal was put out without any shared governance input. It's my understanding that the faculty reps were not involved in the formulation of this program. And so I think it's hard for us to imagine that shared governance will improve in this process, especially with the idea that programs would be decided at the system level. And that duplicative programs may be removed. And again, I echo the concerns stated by the previous individual from Madison, that I guess I'm going to put it this way, that bureaucrats at the central office are not necessarily the right people for determining which programs should thrive and which programs are duplicative. And now I want to just launch into my particular question, and I have others, but I'll start with this one. Which campuses would get which programs? How would this be determined? And who is making the determination? And as I said, we're skeptical that Madison bureaucrats would be the right people to make these decisions. I just want to talk a little bit about my program. I'm the secondary social studies program coordinator. I'm in teacher education. So I prepare high school and middle school teachers, social studies teachers. At first it might seem, why would we have a history program or a political science program or an economics, geography, psychology or sociology program at different campuses? But if you want to be a secondary teacher in my program, we're deeply integrated. Not only does Whitewater have an outstanding teacher ed program, but part of the reason we have an outstanding teacher ed program is because we have a outstanding letters and sciences and business and education program. And so the idea behind a comprehensive university is that, especially in this day and age of a pandemic, is that you can stay close to home, you can save money and go to a high quality institution and study your passion. So if you want to be a social studies teacher and you live near Whitewater, well, you'd come to Whitewater. But if you live up in Superior, it's likely that you're going to go up there, even though we have the largest, and I would say one of the best, if not the best, teacher ed program. And so I think it's deeply problematic because of the implications on students, that they would have to travel much further from home. And I actually don't know how it pragmatically would work. So I guess I'm looking at the point in the program of removing duplication and how it would be determined who's making that determination, especially the importance of shared governance in making academic decisions. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, James. I'll answer part of that, then I'll switch it over to Ani as well. Shared governance has to be a part of this decision. There's first at the campus level, James, in terms of assessing the programs you're offering for some of the reasons you just described. Secondly, they also have to be a part of the system decision. And that would, regardless of the process we come up with, shared governance, campus leadership, have to be a part of the system decision. And I would hope that it's not some bureaucrat in Madison solely making a decision. However, the requirement in current policies requires that the president recommend to the board program approval for particular programs the campus offers. And that's what I'm talking about. We have to be a part of that process as well. And how do we, using and working with campuses and shared governance in this process, find ways to, and I don't think all duplication is bad by any means, for some of the reasons you expressed. But at the same time, looking at that as one lens through which, hey, are we duplicating programs? Is that necessary? And can the state afford that given the financial crisis? If not, can we share it? Can we find ways to reduce that cost so we don't make it a lesser quality? We actually invest more money in that. And that is a reallocation process as well, James. And with that, I'll just shift it over to Ani and her thoughts on some of this as too, James.
So let me amplify some of the mentions that happened earlier, and that is that shared governance is key to all of this. And what is happening now is the identification of what the process would look like, and that inclusivity of shared governance should be involved in both the process design, the implementation of the process, and in total decision making. So I don't know how this will evolve, mostly because part of that evolution will be very much dependent on the recommendations that we hear from you.
I think there was one other comment in there, whether James said it or Eric, I can't remember, that these concepts were put forward without shared governance input or input from the chancellors or other. That's absolutely true. I'm not disputing that at all. These are the recommendations of an exiting president. I tried to make that clear. These are my thoughts as I prepare to retire.
All right, we have one more person queued up to speak, and that is Justin Weselek. And if others are interested in speaking, please raise your hand to do so. I do have some questions in the Q&A to follow up with as well. Justin, you should be unmuted.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, wonderful. So hi, I am Justin Wesley. I am the Director of Academic Affairs for the Whitewater Student Government, was this year and will be next year. So I have a comment and a question. My comment is, first of all, just thank you for holding this meeting early on in the process. I hope we continue to have meetings like this I know we do very well with the chancellor and the system level as well. My question is specifically with the program prioritization process. What is the end goal? Is the end goal just to get a list of programs together? Is it to have less programs at every campus, or maybe a mixture of the two, where once we get that list, we assess what needs to be done, maybe nothing needs to be done, maybe a lot of programs need to be, I don't want to say removed, but I will. What's the end goal, I guess? Where do we go after whatever this first phase looks like? Thank you.
Thanks, and I believe Regent Klein had a comment too, so I'll respond to that, Doug. So thank you. I think the end goal, first of all, we have to understand what we have, and we do have a list of program offerings at every campus by SIP code CIP. So we know what those are. And the alternative here is, let's take a look at New Jersey for a second, and Missouri and Michigan. What would happen at Whitewater in this case if we had to cut your budget an additional 25%? That's what's happening in New Jersey right now. What would we do? Michigan has to, not the university, but the whole state has to find $3.5 billion by the 1st of September. I forget what Missouri's amount is, but it's going to be devastating to Missouri. Universities tend to be, in terms of state aid, tend to be discretionary pots of money, not non-discretionary. That is, the state doesn't view us as a necessary expense. So having said that, I think we're faced with some serious financial challenges, though we don't know exactly what those are yet, those serious financial challenges. And there are those in the state that believe we should close some campuses. I do not. I think that would be a worst case scenario. For the access points we need, for some of the reasons that James and Eric articulated, I think that's really important. So how can we work together to share programs? May not have all the resources required to offer that program on a given campus, but can we share those? Can we identify where there is duplication? And if you go through the Massey process, or the Dickinson process, or the Campbell and Booker process, you attempt to identify through an objective lens, as objective as it can be, quality issues, cost issues, enrollment issues, things of that nature that need to be assessed. So what I'm saying is, noise here, Jeff. What I am saying is that I think that going through those objective process individually as campuses, and then subsequently with shared governance, of course, and the system, trying to determine where we are duplicating and creating an expense that is necessary or isn't warranted, and then making things collaborative. The timeline I put forward is too aggressive, so I'm sorry about that.
Go ahead. Can you hear me okay? I would just say a couple quick things and ask a question back to those on the phone. And first of all, I'd say thanks again for being here and for sharing thoughts. This might not be perfect. I, for one, am standing in my garage to access the best possible broadband so I can be with you all. But I think, you know, we are committed to the shared governance concept at the Board of Regents. We want to hear from faculty and administrative staff. It's important to us. I think we feel, some of us, at least at the Board of Regents, said we've been moving incrementally to more collaborative degrees and to greater consistency and cooperation throughout the system. But it's been more incremental and not as maybe organized or fast-paced as maybe it could be. In the role where, in the mode where we're all committed to the best possible University of Wisconsin system, and where we all feel maybe there's going to be more hybrid education with the pandemic and the endemic situation, maybe after pandemic. How do you all feel that shared governance best expresses itself in terms of program array and collaborative efforts? Because that's something that, as you said on the Board of Regents, it's hard to see how it works if everybody has total autonomy. So I just would ask that question.
We have William Tischler, who has raised his hand to speak, and we can, and as people respond to that, Regent Klein, I'll try to, if they respond in the Q&A, I will try to share that with the group if they respond to that exact question. William, you should be off mute. Mr. Tischler? Okay.
There we go. Okay, here we go. Sorry about that. Yeah, Bill Tischler with ASEC here in Madison. Actually, I have a question regarding broadband, since it is an issue, actually for some of us here in this conference, in this meeting. What is the UW? How is, actually, my question really is, how is the UW system going to leverage its influence to increase broadband access and accessibility for students in the state of Wisconsin, if looking particularly at kind of the third proposal that in the blueprint?
So as you know, William, we have been advocating for that for quite some time. And that is a concern of ours. It varies, and as you can see, certain bandwidth capability, even on this conference call, is not perfect. Do I believe that will improve? Yes, and I also know that in the federal bill, I think it's a part of the HEROES Act, though that probably won't get through the Senate, but at the federal level, there's significant additional investment in broadband. So I think that there are a lot of efforts, both at the federal and state level, to try to expand that. One of the things that this recent donation from a significant donor has done for us, some of that money is to be used to distribute end user tools, laptops, and the like. So those are also not all ubiquitous for all of our students. In addition to that, and that will help, in addition to that, hotspots in an effort to help them better access, obviously, through broadband where they can. So there are efforts in that area, but it is a weakness for distance learning, and this conference call obviously demonstrates some of that.
All right, we'll go to, thank you, Ray. We'll go to Wade Tillett next, and Wade, you should be unmuted.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. As you may know, there's a petition with over 3,200 signatures on it regarding the blueprint, and that petition has 3 main points. The petition calls on UW system and university leaders to ensure that, 1, the decisions impacting the structure and/or mission of any university within the UW system be made autonomously and at the university level. 2, that all decisions be the result of formal, ongoing, and robust consultation with the shared governance groups of each university, with a focus on maintaining and enhancing quality academic instruction. And 3, that there be full and complete transparency in these decision-making processes. Can you commit to honoring these calls made by over 3,200 people?
Well, let me start with the word autonomous. First of all, the language in statute requires that the board provide each institution within the system the widest degree of autonomy possible under board policies and state statutes. So there's a constraint already with that. The campuses are subject to board authority and board approval, with the understanding that trying to give them the widest degree of autonomy possible. However, during a difficult financial crisis, is the board willing to sacrifice 2 or 3 campuses in order to achieve that? I think not, but that's my recommendation, and that's why that's on the board. Secondly, I think we will readily commit to the widest engagement and involvement of shared governance possible. Faculty own the curriculum. Doesn't mean they get to decide which programs are offered on a campus, but what is taught, the content of those programs, that is owned by the faculty, and we will honor that fully, or at least I will, as long as I'm here, and I suspect the board will as well. And transparency, I think that's exactly what we're doing today. And as the process goes forward, I believe Ani and Rob and I are committed to making sure that happens. Absolutely.
All right, thank you, Ray. We've got one more person queued up with their hand raised that hasn't spoken yet, and that is Leslie Petty. You should be unmuted now, Leslie.
Yes. Hi, I'm Leslie Petty, and I am with the Academic Staff Executive Committee here at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And I like for you to speak about the timeline. I think it's an ambitious timeline of January 2021, as well as an ambitious timeline for mission statements to be submitted by March to the board by March of 2021. Understanding that asking for campuses to revisit their mission statements can be a big undertaking, because you're looking at them having to revisit what that target audience look like, what product and services these campuses offer, as well as what is the uniqueness of each campus, each program, and how do you see that framework moving forward related to the mission statement? Because I do think that you do have to have some level of foundation. And how do you help these help the various campuses build that out? I think that's a very important element when we look at strategic planning, when we look at program prioritization, when we are basically operating in the landscape of COVID-19.
2021 timeframe is way too aggressive, and I realized that shortly after I said it. So obviously that has to be changed. You just can't accomplish these things even without COVID-19, but the anxiety and the turmoil that all of this creates just exacerbates our ability to reach that timeline. So I think that has to be adjusted, and I think that has to be an outgrowth of the next phase. Okay, what is an appropriate time frame to make sure we have adequate engagement on each campus and across the system?
We have a response to Regent Klein's question in the Q&A, and this is from Eric. It will take a contact person at system to manage the process properly. A good manager can make this work. We have plenty of examples at campus levels. He's happy to provide examples. I don't know, Regent Klein, if you want to follow up on that at all. I unmuted you.
I think that's a good idea, and I think we at the Education Committee and Regent Manydeeds and Regent Walsh and I are all part of the Education Committee. We look at these programs, and there is, a question of, when does collaboration work? How does it work best? How do we get to online learning as the best of breed? And so I do think having a contact person who can actually identify where the jewels are, so that we can make sure those jewels are available, not just, maybe at one campus. Now that might be different from where you were heading, but to me, I think, again, I go back to what we're all trying to accomplish, which is we want University of Wisconsin system to be the finest public education system in the country. That's what we want. So how do we get there, and how do we harness? I like the idea of a contact person. And I think how to do it is really important, because shared governance is super important to our system. my observation as a region is sometimes hard to do it perfectly because it requires a lot of stakeholders, and we have open meetings, and and everything is always in such a big context. So if you all have ideas like the contact liaison who might be responsible for providing input both to the system but also to the ultimately the Board of Regents Committee on Education as to how to propel our academic mission throughout, that would be great. And I appreciate the comment.
So Jeff, can I follow up on that too?
Of course.
Vice President Hani Morbel-Sosa and her team will be the contact individuals for recommendations 1 and 3, that is prioritization, evaluation, and the online strategy. They already have Laura in Ani's office already does a lot of that with shared governance and with the faculty rep. So each campus sends a faculty rep, and I've been having a weekly phone call with them for the last, I don't know, 3 at least weeks. So there's a lot of engagement at that level, and some of them often don't go back and share that information, but some of that is happening. And then Rob Kramer, Vice President Rob Kramer, is the contact person for the shared services, streamlining standardization of processes. And maybe we need to post that or publish that so shared governance representatives from each campus know exactly who to contact. And the faculty and academic university staff and student reps from each campus regularly meet with us. So that's something that that channel of communication needs to be open as well.
Before I call on the next folks, I want to, if you've spoken and you don't want to speak again, you can take your hand down. If you want to speak again, you can leave it up. And once I get everybody else a chance to speak first, I'll gladly come back through. But if you are not interested in speaking again, Leslie took her hand down. And second, I know there's been a request to share the petition that was discussed earlier. If you send that to the board office, I am sure Jess Lathrop will share that with the entire board and with system administration. And if you can do that, or you can send it to me, jbarant@uwsa.edu, and I'll make sure it gets into the right hands as well. So with that, we'll go to Balaji. You should be unmuted.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Balaji. I'm an associate professor in Uw-Whitewater. I had a comment to make as well as a question as well. So my first question is, perhaps President Cross has already addressed this. You're breaking up a little bit on my end. I apologize if you already answered this. In addition to involving shared governance leaders, is there a plan to talk to students and community members and business leaders, etc., to seek their feedback? So that was one of my questions. The second comment I have is about Uw-Whitewater's online program. As you know, Uw-Whitewater has exceptional online programs. We have online MBA and MS programs in cybersecurity analytics and communication, etc. So we have developed this core competence, if you will, over several years. And so this is part of our brand identity. So when you talk about point 1, which talks about distinctiveness and brand identity, the online education is actually part of our identity. So we believe that if you centralize online education, it would probably be detrimental to Whitewater and it'll undermine our brand, and probably the motivation to develop new programs would probably go away, and it may lose students as well. So that is our core concern. So point 1 and point 3, when you talk about distinctiveness and also centralizing online education, in Whitewater's case, this might be detrimental. So that is my point. And if you could comment on both these points, thank you.
Let me start with my response to the first in terms of your distinctiveness and what you are recognized for. And I agree, you are. In fact, that isn't the only area that you are exceptional. I think, as James mentioned earlier, I believe the education programs there, I think that's the largest in the state, as I recall. Let me respond to that, and this is somewhat of a rhetorical question. Right now, the University of Wisconsin in total, including University of Wisconsin at Whitewater, has somewhere between 5 and 8% of market share in the upper Midwest. So as good as your program is, its ability to reach a larger audience, given its quality, is limited in terms of the resources you can extend for marketing. If you look at Southern New Hampshire, you look at Western Governors, you look at Purdue Global, you look at Arizona State, I could probably name a few more that you've probably seen their advertisements on television. They are capturing the market. We need a unified strategic online strategy that allows us to shift more resources into marketing, because I think what we offer, and especially Whitewater, I think what we offer is better. And it's simple. It's that simple. We have better brand identity. University of Wisconsin is widely respected. How do we leverage that? And a distributed model makes that more difficult. Now, to the part that you felt like we were centralizing this, I think it's more of a collaboration, coordination process to create a unified strategic online model. At this point, everybody's offering different degrees, and in many cases, we are competing with each other for that market. And that's similar to what General Motors did for years when they had a Pontiac version of a vehicle, a Chevy, a Buick, an Oldsmobile. All those models, all they did was change the tail lights and the grill or something to that effect, and it was just essentially the same vehicle. While that's not exactly what we're doing, in many ways we're competing with each other. How do we expand the market? It's true also that that Whitewater generates considerable resources that they don't want to give up, and I don't blame them. But I would argue that you should be able to double or triple those resources through better marketing and more unified approach. It's not to take money away from you, but to grow that market share in a much more concerted effort and build on that identity in a way that doesn't create the UW system online, but helps to elevate UW-Whitewater along with Platteville and Stevens Point and Eau Claire and River Falls and Green Bay and Oshkosh, everybody else that delivers online program. How do we elevate that in a way that gives it greater market share?
Thank you, Ray. Next up, and this is David Simmons. And David, you should be unmuted now.
Okay, thanks. Everyone can hear me okay?
You bet we can.
Okay. I just want to acknowledge my colleagues from UW-Whitewater and thank everyone for giving us this opportunity because, as we know, it's the regional comprehensives whose missions stand to lose the most through this blueprint plan. So I appreciate that my colleagues have both spoken to this and that you were giving us the time today. I also appreciate the offer to help us get this petition in front of the Regents and UW System Administration. I would encourage that once you get a chance to read that petition, that you look very closely at the comments that are being made by citizens across the state who have said in no uncertain terms that they value the regional comprehensives, they value the degrees that they've received, they value liberal education, and they value the Wisconsin idea. So the fact that more than 3,000 citizens have joined UW-Whitewater's faculty just goes to show that these are not just the values that faculty share, because as it's been pointed out, we do have control of our curriculum, and we're very proud of the work we do as protectors of the academic quality of our institutions. So I just want to make sure that when that petition is read, that it's clear that the citizens of Wisconsin do value the opportunities they get at the regional comprehensive institutions, and they share the high quality of the academic opportunities that they've been given at the regional comprehensives, and they have shown their support in no uncertain terms for the Wisconsin idea. So I just wanted to point those things out, and thank you for your time today and the time of my colleagues as well. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, David. The next question, I'm going to take, I'm going to consolidate a couple questions that have come in on the Q&A that are focused on shared services and see if maybe Rob wants to tackle that. One question involved some of the initial startup costs to some of the changes you want to make in the consolidation efforts. And then I'm going to combine that with a question somebody also asked, what lessons are you able to take away from the challenges we faced in the 2-year consolidation project in terms of implementing the shared services aspect of the blueprint?
So I'll start with the second part first. I think the restructuring provides some good lessons, which are reinforced by some of the other efforts we've made around shared services. And key for me is we've created a remarkably complicated operational environment across all of our different campuses. Some of that complexity is helpful in pursuing our academic mission. Some of it, frankly, creates barriers to trying to be either more effective or more efficient. So I think one of the key lessons is, where is complexity useful versus where is it really becoming a barrier as we go forward. Startup costs is going to be an important question as we look at the different areas. I think in the area of HR, we've actually probably moved past a lot of the kind of initial one-time activities, and now it's picking up speed and accelerating on the roadmap processes that were identified earlier, finishing up the ones that are in place, partly rolled out, and then moving on to the next set. We should actually start seeing some simplifications of our environment as we do that. So for example, right now, comprehensive campuses for the support of the hiring process either use PeopleSoft, PageUp, or I think it's People Admin, one of 3 different tools, kind of deliver the same support of the initial process around hiring folks. We need to work with the comprehensives fairly quickly and decide which of those is the tool we want to standardize, and then how do we migrate to that standardization so that some of the campuses can stop paying for separate software, and we can also support it more through a virtual model of individuals to the different campuses. In the IT space, as we look at moving toward IT as a service, working with the CIOs and the campuses, shared governance, to identify what makes sense there, and then what investments can we leverage, and where over time, as we reach end of life of some of the equipment, do we standardize and move toward a simpler environment there. So I hope that's helpful.
Thank you, Rob. And before going back to a couple people who are still have their hands up, and they spoke a little while ago, I want to make sure I cover as many different people as we can. I'm going to consolidate 2 more questions that came in. First, there was a question about how best to engage students in this from Uw-Whitewater. I know that, and I can answer that question a little bit. We're working with President Cross. We've been talking about creating kind of a council of student body presidents and vice presidents that will meet regularly with system leadership. And similar in the ways that our other shared governance groups operate at the system level, we think that might provide some more direct interaction with system admin and our campus leaders. But the second part was Balaji wanted a little more information, Ray, on the efforts to engage other stakeholders, business leaders, students, and in general on the plan itself.
Oh yeah, that's right. I did not answer that. If you look at any process of program prioritization or evaluation on an individual campus, it does involve not only businesses, the community, and alumni, but students. The process is an all-inclusive, engaging process regarding the assessment and evaluation of existing programs, and particularly their strength. So yeah, that is a normal process. And then of course, once all of that has been done around the system, how does the system engage shared governance and look at that in a holistic way that would involve input from obviously businesses as well as communities? So I don't think that would be left out. If it is, it would be a major change. And I I suspect those campuses that have already gone through some form of program prioritization and evaluation clearly have engaged the community as well as alumni and businesses.
One more question on the restructuring, actually, the 2 years, and I think this is connected in terms of before you move, as we move forward or consider moving forward with this new plan. Has there been a formal assessment of the restructuring process of the 2-year campuses? And if there hasn't been, are we planning to do one in the near future?
By formal assessment, they need an outside engaged entity to look at the assessment of that process. The answer is no. I think we weren't intending to do an assessment of that until 5 years out, because it's going to take a while in order to absorb that into our existing institutions. However, I would add that the administrative costs that were associated with the colleges and extension, I don't remember right now how many individuals are no longer employed by the system, but I know it was at least 100. So I know there's been savings, and our goal has been to transfer those savings to the campuses. And that's been our goal. Rob may want to speak to some of this. He's more closely engaged with that than I am.
I think you touched on President Cross, a big piece of it. There was, I think, what can be characterized as an interim kind of checkup by HLC on the process. Because one of the first things we did in the restructuring was submit a change in structure proposal to HLC. I think the general feedback on that from December of 2018, if I have my dates correct, was generally pretty favorable about the process to that date. And they had some items that they highlighted for the institutions to continue to work on, I think particularly around communications and student services. And we submitted in the HLC also a number of metrics that we would be reporting on as we move towards that 5-year more formal assessment. And I think institutions are continuing to track on those.
That's a good point. I think we were given a lot of praise by HLC, which was very gratifying. But one of the concerns they had is one of the concerns we've had. We felt like the resources that the 2-year campuses were using to support student services had been weakened significantly before the restructure, and that was exposed in the HLC review, and that's something we were concerned about as well.
Another question here in the Q&A that I think summarizes a lot of the concerns expressed. So I'll read it in its entirety because I think it should be helpful. President Cross shared the steps for prioritizing and evaluating academic and administrative programs will involve a 2-part process, a campus process with guidelines from UW system and a system process that will engage shared governance. What does the process look like for developing the guidelines that the campuses will operate under? Will the shared governance groups be included and ask for feedback before guidelines are finalized?
I would certainly respond to that by saying I hope so. That would be part of a normal process. Here are the guidelines that we think should be used. Would you help us either modify them or change them? Do you think they're appropriate? Or perhaps you would prefer to draft some guidelines. We're comfortable with that as well. Something that would help guide the the prioritization and evaluation process on a campus. We definitely need help at the system level in looking at those subsequent to the campus review. So that's certainly something we would encourage, and we'll look forward to doing that. From my perspective, I don't think that's a problem. Maybe Ani has a comment on that, or Rob.
Let me add a comment to that, and that is that, as you well know, not only do institutions go through a review process for HLC reaccreditation, but also you have individual programs that may be externally accredited. And so you already have in that preparation a series of guidelines and parameters to look at programs. I think what is encouraging here is the need to take a look at the connection between resources as well as institutional mission and vision. What are those resources? They are both human, they are physical, IT, and financial. So all of those areas are areas in which we would very much encourage all of you to provide us your views on what some of those guidelines should be.
I think I would add for the perspective of where we're looking at expanding the shared services. We'll want to work on engaging with governance and others further on that. You know, right now, the shared services group has a customer council, includes folks from Parkside and Whitewater and some other institutions. We started that with the provosts and CBOs when we started the shared services. So I think one of the questions what to think about going forward is what's kind of the right model for accountability and transparency and informing decisions on service provision as we move that along.
All right, we have a few minutes left, and I know James Hartwick has submitted a number of questions online, and I thought since his hand is up, maybe we'd let him submit those verbally. So
Sure.
Should be unmuted, James.
Sure. Thank you so much. I was trying to sort of chime in around other people's topics. So with the online programs, our online programs, which are, you know, nationally recognized, they support up to $4.2 million is used to support other programs within the institution. So you can't just lop off part of a program, something that's central, as Balaji was suggesting, and then just give it to system. Plus, if I'm going to develop an online program, what's my incentive? How does it help if it goes to UW system? I think that proposal seems deeply problematic. However, UW system could play a role in creating a portal in which all the online programs are organized and easily searchable so that a person can choose for themselves and that the programs remain on campus. UW system could also market such a program. So the effort could be not to take the programs or to oversee them, which I again think will undermine the quality of the program, undermine the incentive to develop new programs, but it will. But UW system can play a role in marketing and creating a portal. So that's one comment. I think the bigger comment that I want to make at this point, though, is that this is analogous to a pretty significant, if not complete, reworking of UW system. So there was a 2-year study in the late 60s that took place, I believe, that involved thousands of students, involved business leaders, community members. I contacted our business association, and I don't want to speak for them, but I did talk to some of the business leaders in the community, and they're really concerned about this. They see enrollments going down because of this, not going up. And if one of the problems is we have a problem with enrollment, and we know that Wisconsin is behind many other states in the country on enrollment levels, what we need to do is encourage greater enrollment and lift all the students in our society. And the way to do that, first of all, it requires a significant undertaking and evaluation involving all the stakeholders, including business and community members. I think the idea of centralizing is problematic on many fronts. Even IT seemed like the most promising part of the program, the centralization of IT. And yet one wonders, when we centralize our travel program, how we receive reimbursement for travel, it's incredibly cumbersome. It'll take you a half a day to fill out travel reports. And that's partly because it's so centralized. I don't know that we've saved any money by doing that. Maybe we have, but we would need to look at a lot of things before we move forward with this. And I think we need to include, we need to really harken back to the Wisconsin idea. And at Whitewater, a number of years ago, we had a motto that was stay close, go far. If we centralize programs, we undermine online programs, we're going to undermine our brand, and we're going to undermine our ability for our students to be able to stay close and go far. And I think that speaks widely across the system. I think that would be echoed by many of the comprehensive institutions. Okay, so thank you once again. Thanks for listening to us.
I think there's a misunderstanding about what it means to have a unified strategic online approach. Somehow there's an idea that the central office is going to take things over. Whether it's a portal or it's a marketing tool, we have to expand that. We also have to look at duplication in those programs, James. So that's something that we have to do. So I think there's a misinterpretation of what the intent is there, and that may be my fault the way it's expressed in the concept. But secondly, I don't think anybody at all intends to ignore business and community input. That's especially important. I will respond to that comment to every campus with this simple question. If you don't know what your portion of the 5%, roughly 5% or $45 million reduction in state and GPR to your campus is, you probably should. That's this year. That has to happen out of cash, not out of your base budget, but out of cash. If that was cut 25%, in other words, if your budget was cut from GPR was cut 25%, what would you do? What I'm proposing to the board is to look at this in a system-wide fashion, not just on a given campus, because that risks individual campuses. Some campuses are in better financial shape than others, but if we're all cut 25%, and that don't quote me on that. I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm saying that some of our peers around the country have been cut that much. If that happens, there will be, if we don't take action, there will be fewer campuses in the system. And to me, that is not a viable option.
All right. And with that, I hear my dog starting to bark upstairs. You're going to hear it in any second. We are a couple minutes over. I don't, Ray, if you have any other comments you want to make, or any of the panelists or board members, now might be a good time to do that.
I will simply say thanks to each of you for taking the time to participate. Make sure that we do get your petition and that we understand it. But I would ask you also to have a little bit of an open mind in looking at this. There is no effort here to harm anybody. The effort is to try to find a way to navigate through this very difficult fiscal challenge that has been exacerbated by the coronavirus. That we need to get through this together, and it's not going to be easy, and we're going to look a little different on the other side of this. But preserving this system, as great as it is critical. So those are thank you all.
Thank you, President Cross. I also wanted to echo my thanks to the faculty and staff who were on this call. I hope that you understand how deeply important the opinions of our shared governance partners are. In particular, I can speak for the board. We're very concerned, not only because it's the law, it's the way we are to run things, but you folks are our boots on the ground. You know the most about your students, you know the most about your region, the most about your industrial partners. So if we were to do this without you, it would be certainly at our peril. So I hope this week is just an opening of channels to you folks. And I want to say right away, please don't hesitate to contact. Our contact information is up on the web, on the Regent's website. So, you know, I personally don't mind. I like to speak to faculty. I like to work with you, and I consider you crucial to this whole process. So thank you again for your dedication.
Does anyone else want to say a few words, or Should we wrap her up? Okay. With that, thank you everyone for participating, and we'll sure have more dialogue in the future.
Thanks, everyone.